Hey everybody, and welcome to another Kanoa Reviews. Last time I took a look at level 60 to level 70 content from the Burning Crusade to see if it was still worth playing in 2020, especially with World of Warcraft having evolved so much over the years, offering more varied gameplay, story and quests. Burning Crusade content is definitely still the biggest pill to swallow, as it has painfully slow and grindy quests and is to this day still the closest experience to WoW Classic in the retail edition. But what about Wrath of the Lich King? Especially with Shadowlands coming very soon and giving you the chance to tackle whatever expansion you want through Chromitime. Is it actually worth leveling through Wrath of the Lich King content from 10 to 50? Now, as of making this review, Shadowlands has not released yet, so I'm still tackling this review as if it were now, where you have to actually get there from level 58 or up. Back in the day when Wrath of the Lich King was first released, it promised to improve on a lot of things, including the quest stories, as it would focus far more on the actual war with the Lich King and have him much more in the forefront than Illidan, Burning Crusade's main antagonist, who was barely in the story at all. Wrath of the Lich King might still be one of my favorite expansions, if not the favorite, and I can happily say that yes, Wrath of the Lich King content is still definitely worth experiencing in 2020, albeit that I might be a little subjective to nostalgia and lore since I think the Arthas plotline is so excellent. I will not talk about the Death Knight class, nor his starter area, as I just will be focusing on the leveling and questing experience in Northrend and if it's a lot of fun or feels more like a grind like in the Burning Crusade. So first, the fact that we finally get to go to Northrend and clash with Arthas and his armies is a concept people had been wanting since the release of World of Warcraft Vanilla. Warcraft 3 was actually the first Warcraft game I played, and it's still one of those strategy games with an excellent campaign that basically tells your fantasy version of Darth Vader in the form of Prince Arthas, a noble highborn who promised to bring unity to his people, but ended up becoming the most evil undead ruler and slaughtering thousands of his own, including his father. You set out on your adventure from the docks of your respective capitals and have the choice to either go to Borean Tundra or Howling Fjord. Both areas are excellent, but for both Alliance and Horde, I would suggest starting with the Tundra. Though I mainly play Alliance and therefore most of my experience will be from their perspective, I did have a Horde character back in the day that I leveled up to 80, and the starting area for the Horde has you enter this giant fortress as soldiers are desperately struggling with the Lich minions surrounding the alcoves. The Alliance, on the other hand, has, in my opinion, an even better opening, as you enter this harbor town where all these soldiers are lined up to join the war against Arthas. You get acquainted with all the officials in this town, and soon take the beating towards the front line on the beaches, where Alliance soldiers are holding off the incoming grotesque insects sent by the Lich himself. It almost has a sort of D-Day feeling, and the good thing here is that even though you still get the quest of killing enemies, they are not the ridiculous number of kill 20 or 30, but rather kill 8 or 10, which makes it feel far less grindy. Soon after, you find out that there is a secret cult held up in the harbor town, and you are not sure who to trust or not. It's a really cool story that showcases exactly how the creators improved on the storytelling. And this continues throughout the zone, as you will talk to an agent who has seen the name of her deceased brother appear on recent reports, sending you to find out if he's still alive or not. This will turn you to meet a Death Knight and his companion, who have taken up arms against their former master, and together you take out several high-ranking members of the Undead Scourge. The quest line eventually leads up to a climactic battle on top of a flying fortress, where even a vision of Arthas himself presents itself and speaks. This was the expansion where a lot more voice acting was used, and though it might seem like little voice acting compared to expansions like Legion and Battle for Azeroth, the addition of more voice recorded lines was definitely noticeable compared to Burning Crusade and Vanilla. As mentioned before, Howling Fjord is also definitely worth your time, as it's just so gorgeous to look at with a beautiful hulking castle next to a dam and mighty cliffs surrounding it. Here too you find yourself in a harbor town, battling giants who have allied themselves with Arthas' armies, and it's all very cool and the music is beautiful too. But because you are fighting a third-party faction that has joined with the main bad guy, it does not feel as direct as the Borean Tundra does, which is why I recommend doing the Tundra quests first. The overall questing experience is very pleasant and done in a way where you can experience a lot of different zones and storylines through natural progress. I said before that I love the Pandaria zone and its stories, but it's far too dense for only spending 5 levels there, and it ruins the experience. Here in Wrath, you can easily level your way through most of 4 to 5 zones and see the best the game has to offer. Dragonblight is another zone that is excellent. Though initially I'm not that big of a fan of one color tone, which is the icy blue in this case, the storylines make more than up for it. During your questing in Dragonblight, you will face more high-ranking generals that fight for the Lich King, and even will have to defend entire cities using siege weapons. The scale is what makes this zone stand out above the previous two, and is a good natural progression to further the plot. It even still has the awesome questline that ends up with the excellent Wrathgate cinematic, a cinematic that in my opinion still looks cool to this day, if somewhat simple. The downside to this quest is, however, that it ends with the Wrathgate and does no longer include the epilogue, where you head towards the Undercity to deal with a rebellion against Sylvanas. You would fight alongside legendary figures like King Rin and Thrall, and brought the entire story to an epic conclusion. In its current state, it just ends abruptly. The zone also has a fun quest where you need to protect a certain area, and you get help from your future self, and then afterward, you need to help your past self. The quest itself is nothing special, as it's just holding out wave after wave, but the writing that your own past or future self delivers is quite fun. Then the other area I can definitely recommend is Icecrown, where the Alliance and Horde take the battle to Arthas' castle gates itself. The cool thing with this zone is that through instancing, things in the world will actually change as the quests go along. This is very normal in WoW nowadays, but was quite revolutionary back in the day. Since everybody was sharing the same world, it seemed impossible to change the world depending on the actions of an individual. But through this new method, this was possible, albeit for the people who completed a certain quest or requirement. The cool thing about Icecrown is that the entire zone feels like a massive battlefield on a scale like the end battle of Lord of the Rings. The buildup is perfect too, with you fighting the Arachnid forces in the beginning, and then to man one of the turrets on the towers and fight the incoming dragons. Eventually, you will be fighting amongst hundreds of undead in between the icy walls that separate the Horde and Alliance armies from entering the castle. It also introduces the flying battleships for each faction, which adds a very cool touch. A lot of the quests here revolve around killing a certain number of enemies, but the overarching plot and skill makes up for that. It brings the overall Wrath of the Lich King experience to an epic climax. The dungeons themselves are also excellent and have far more personality and detail than the vanilla dungeons, and especially the Burning Crusade dungeons. Thinking back on it, the Burning Crusade dungeons really stand out as a bland dungeon experience. The cool thing with the dungeons in Wrath is that you still will encounter Arthas' footprint several times, as his vision will be seen throughout. Several minions will pray to the Dark Lord or even communicate with him. It makes you feel like you are getting one step closer to face Arthas in the end. The final 3 dungeons are even connected to each other, which is a very cool idea. It does make the overall dungeon run quite long, but it starts out really slow in the belly of the beast as you fight beside Jaina Proudmoore and her champions, and eventually will come face to face with Arthas himself, only to realize he's too strong and then have to flee the dungeon as he chases you. It's a very cool touch and makes him seem all the more powerful. And then there's of course the Icecrown raid, one of the better raids back in the day. Though it can feel a bit bland compared to the variety in raids we get nowadays, just the fact that you and your group of friends were taking in the battle to Arthas was such a rush. There's so much lore and storytelling going on throughout this entire raid. From the beginning, where all the forces, including the king, are assembled as they address Arthas himself, who reveals that Bolvar has become his new champion. The boss fight that this raid offers are some of the best, with the scythe-wielding skeletal guardian in the beginning being very fun, as mobility is key and teamwork is essential, with members getting pierced in ice. The raid then takes twists and turns, with you taking the battle up towards the ramparts, where you fight alongside NPC teammates and even fly high above on Battleship, where a battle unfolds as well, to even fighting the Horde commander who fell during the confrontation with Arthas at the Wrathgate, and an appearance from Saurfang. The music throughout this entire raid is excellent as well, from the beautifully haunting choir while you explore the halls, to the sweeping orchestras during the battle against Arthas' main undead dragon. It all fits so well and rewards the player for going through this expansion. The final battle against Arthas is epic and full of danger, just like you want as a player who regards Arthas as such a powerful nemesis. If you play the raid in Heroic, you even get to be face to face with Arthas' father, which made me nerdgasm a bit. And then finally, when you have bested him, you get a wonderful cutscene that brings it all to an end. There's really not much to complain about regarding the Wrath of the Lich King experience. Some raids and dungeons feel a bit lackluster, especially the Colosseum update that brings the Trial of Champions felt really half-baked. Other zones like Grizzly Hills are really beautiful and offer gorgeous music, but don't do much in terms of the main story. I could see that if you've never experienced Warcraft 3 and therefore do not care that much about the story arc of Arthas, that this might not be that impactful. But even then, I think the epic war setting will be to many people's liking, and it feels very coherent as an overall questing experience, even more so than some of the later questing experiences like Legion. So to answer the question I started this video with, if it's still worth to play Wrath of the Lich King content to this day, the answer is an absolute yes. The story, the environments, the epic scale, and even more variety in the quests makes this expansion that really felt like it was putting a step forward. The expansion gets an 8.5, and it will be difficult to top for upcoming expansions. Currently, I do have a level 120 character with an item level of 450, and I'm really looking forward to Shadowlands. I will take a look next at the Cataclysm expansion, and see how it stands up compared to Modern WoW nowadays. Cataclysm promises even more variety in quests and even a zone that is entirely underwater. Unique experiences guaranteed. But if it's still fun to play in 2020, we will see next time on Konoha Reviews.